I'm Michael Haffner. I'm studying mechanical engineering. Currently, I'm a second year, so it was my first experience in a college class, and it was a lot more relaxed than I was expecting. It was a lot more engaging than I was expecting. We were talking to professors, we were going out to get lunch with them, we'd go get food with them, and the people that you were living with were the people in your classes. It was really weird, but it was really cool. I probably shouldn't say weird. Weird in the best way possible. It was new, I guess what I should say about that. It was really new having such an informal familiarity with your professors. Because you were going out to get lunch with them occasionally, you'd go get food with them, they'd be going on the same tours as you, and some of the stuff they'd never seen before either. So you were kind of bonding over these shared experiences. And it was really cool. It was like having your best friend that also knew everything about early British literature. So I signed up a little bit late, so the colloquium I took was actually with Dr. McIntyre, and that was over Isaac Newton, so Newtonian physics and optics, his life and history, and then also it was William Harrison's, and the chronometer was it was solving the problem of longitude. And I just remember it was really cool. We went to Greenwich, just outside of downtown London, where they have the Greenwich Observatory, and that was they put the prime meridian there. They based all of their longitudinal calculations based off of Greenwich being the 0 mark. And so the theory being that it would split the Earth in half. And we've realized now, just recently using satellites, that if you do truly want to split the world in half by mass, since it's not a perfect sphere, that the true prime meridian should be actually like 100 feet west, and it ended up being at a trash can. It was pretty cool. We pulled out our phones and we triangulated the true prime meridian, which was just a little bit off of Greenwich. So that was fun. It was really cool. It ended up being almost exactly at a garbage can. Dr. McIntyre had a better GPS than just the ones on our phones, and we were all trying to figure it out to like the 0th degree and everything. Because of the satellites, when they triangulate, they base it off the mass of the Earth, like I was saying. And it ended up being a bona fide garbage can. So all of the first year students ended up taking one back core, which was early British literature, that was taught by Dr. Williams and Dr. Olson. But then you had the option of 2 colloquia. I took the Newtonian physics, optics, and the longitudinal one. And then there was one on the civil engineering that was taught by Dr. Ben Mason. And that was talking about the architecture and the design of a lot of things in London. And a good example of that they used was the Millennium Bridge, which crosses the Thames, because there's actually a really interesting civil engineering mistake, I guess you would call it, made when designing that bridge. If you've seen it, it's this really cool, it's this suspension-looking bridge, and it's just a footbridge. It's only for people, it's not for cars or anything. And they didn't realize it until after they had made it, installed it over the river, and cut the ribbon, and people started walking across it, that the oscillations of the footsteps from people walking over the bridge averaged out to an oscillation that was shaking the bridge apart. It was this critical point that it was causing vibrations that was making it structurally unstable, and so they had to close it down. They had to go back and they had to re-engineer it. They didn't tear it down, but they had to figure out a solution. So you can see now that they've added on these real big, really interesting braces, kind of right by where all the cables meet. And this is going to be really hard without a picture of the bridge. Maybe you can superimpose one like right here. Edit and so as you can see in the braces right up there, that actually stabilized the bridge and kept it from falling apart when people walked on it. Cool. I wish I could have taken his class as well. Wish I could have done all of them, but unfortunately we weren't able to. There wasn't enough time in the day. For me, London was really good. It was my first true international experience. I mean, I'd gone to a summer camp just north of the border in Canada. But London was like my first real get out, get abroad international experience, and it was a really awesome opportunity going to London Because it's, one of the larger European cities. It's a big cultural melting pot, but English is also the primary language spoken there, so it's really accessible, especially if you aren't fluent in another language. And that made it really helpful when you're exploring the downtown, when you're going to all the little markets, especially if you accidentally get lost. All the street signs are in English, and because of that, I would really take advantage of the accessibility of the city, especially you guys are gonna have the little Oyster cards with the underground, the tube. You just have the entire downtown at your fingertips, and so go explore, because you don't want to be looking on Instagram a week after and you see somebody took a picture and you're like, oh, I wish I had gone there, because you're spending the money on the plane ticket. You might as well go. So yeah, explore as much as you can. But if I had to do the trip as a whole, I would really want to go back to Cambridge, where we did one of our excursions. They put us all on a train and we went out. It's like a couple hours away. Not bad. That's where Stephen Hawking went to school. That's where Isaac Newton went to school and was a professor. And the big apple tree story where the apple fell on his head and helped him discover gravity. They don't have the original apple tree. That tree still exists at his hometown, but it is a closely guarded secret. They've taken a graft from that tree and they planted it in Cambridge outside of his office where he worked. And the entire college, we walked all around it, is incredible. Just to see the history of academia. It tied directly into, like I was studying Isaac Newton, and then the issues of longitude. You could see these long hallways where Isaac Newton would stamp his foot and that the knocker on the far door would bounce, and that was he was studying reverberations of sound waves and how they were actually a physical thing through air and how they could affect matter, which was really cool, still beyond me. But then even outside of the college itself, right across the street, there was this little old tavern, this pub, this bar that had been there for years. And in World War II, a bunch of these American fighter pilots who were stationed in Cambridge took their lighters and they burned their name into the ceiling and everything. They burned their platoon number and there were pictures and everything. It's the same bar that, Watson and Crick? I'm gonna have to look this up. It was the same bar that Watson and Crick, when they developed or discovered the double helix structure for DNA, they walked into the bar immediately after finding it, and that's where they first announced that they had stumbled across this double helix structure. It's just, Stephen Hawking used to get his hair cut next door, and there was just so much, little just trivia and tidbits of information that were in this place. It was just so densely compacted with things that I found interesting and neat that it would be cool to go back there. I wish I could have had it just another hour. It was so cool. But in London, in the city proper, the Tower of London was really cool. Just again, because I was old, they had examples of the ancient Roman walls from when the Romans actually settled the area of New London, but it's hard to choose just one. Man, I really liked Shakespeare's Globe. I thought that was phenomenal. I hope you guys get to go see a presentation at the Globe Theater. We went and saw Midsummer's Night Dream. That was incredible. Even the Tate Modern was so cool. That's a modern art museum, so it's not for everybody. But there was even just walking around on the streets. I think we went to right by the Into classroom, Into the program that would be hosting this. There was these things called the Old Crutchfield Markets, and it's kind of like what I would call the Portland Saturday Market, but bigger and better, because it's really established, and it's just, there's so many different kinds of food, of clothing being sold, of artwork, there's music. It was so much fun. We'd go there on our lunch break almost every day and grab some food and hang out. The Tower of London, yeah. So the Tower of London has been many things, but it's like this fortress. It's a castle, technically, and the innermost building, which is the quote-unquote tower. It's this old white castle-looking thing. It's just a square, you know, but it's like, it's one of the oldest castles that's still standing today. It's, you know, centuries old. They have all this old armor inside. The Tower of London is also where they keep the crown jewels, so we were able to see those behind, you know, many inches of bulletproof glass and guards. But it did serve as a fortress. The walls did protect the city of London. They've got Traitor's Gate, where Henry VIII brought his wife in to have her executed, and many other prisoners, but that's the notable one. And it's been largely untouched. I mean, they've obviously gone through and made it incredibly safe and available for tourists, but you can go through and you can see exactly the king's quarters. It's the exact same size and dimensions that it was, you know, when Henry VIII was reigning, and you can see how they have it decorated much the same way, and it's the original structure. It's really surreal to take a step into, you know, a couple hundred years ago, more than a couple hundred years ago. You know? Yeah, no, that is old, and it has been standing for a very long time, and that's really cool to me. I guess I just like history, but to see something that's stood the test of time, that's been weathered, and has so many stories associated to it, like the crows. They've had crows there since I think the 1800s, and it's just like a superstition type thing now. Yeah, no, that was cool. Well, and it's weird because like 200 years is an old building for us.
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
ancient. You walk into a house that's 200 years old, you're walking around like, how is this still standing? We went to, you know, there are pubs on the corner street that have established 1633. And it's just another pub, just another bar, it's just another hair salon, it's just another restaurant, it's just another museum, and just, I don't know, I thought it was really cool. You're walking down cobblestone streets that have been around forever. You see little bits of the Roman wall that are almost a millennia old. Oh yeah, fish and chips. Fish and chips have been ruined for me because of London. They were so great over there, and coming back to the States, I haven't been able to find anything that's even comparable to, because, you know, that's the staple of England, I guess, would be the fish and chips and everything. And oh man, I ate that at least 3 times a week while I was over there. It was just so good, and it's available everywhere. They have so many different, like, fish and chips little stands. It's like a hot dog stand, only for fish and chips. And they have little stores, and they have them in every little food cart. They have them at all the pubs and everything. Fish and chips by far. I still haven't found any ones that are as good. I see, like, ever since I went to London, like, the travel bug just bit so hard, because like I said, that was my first international experience, and now I want to go everywhere. So I was able to go to France this past summer, and I'm hopefully going to Nepal over spring break. So something that I thought was cool, like, how many people do you think live in the city of London? 11,000. The city of London is actually, like, different than what we would call London, and it's like the old city. It's this, like, one, like, I think it's like a square mile chunk right on the Thames that used to be walled in, and that's like one of the original colonies from when the Romans came by and settled the area. And so it's like its own incorporated territory, but still technically a part of the city of London. Like, it has its own mayor, but there's also a mayor of what we would consider big London and everything. And so just, that was an interesting little fact that I didn't know, that there was technically 2 Londons, one inside of the other. We were also there coincidentally for the 350th anniversary of the Great London Fire. That was really cool. So in the 1600s, London basically burned down because somebody left a pastry in the oven too long. I'm not joking. It was started by a bakery that had I think it was either bread or a pie or something. I can't remember. I heard both stories. In the oven too long, and all of the roofs of the houses were all thatched. It was all straw and rope and everything, a thatched roof. And because of that, once one building caught fire, once the bakery actually caught fire, the entire city just was raised in just ash. And so because of that, they actually passed a citywide law back in the 1600s that thatched roofs were prohibited, that you weren't allowed to build a building with thatched roofs anymore. And so that solved the problem. That was phenomenal. The infrastructure, the way that they've designed the tube, if I lived in London like permanently, I don't think I would own a car at all. Just going to Paris and everything this past summer too, the European city culture isn't focused around cars at all. It's really hard to drive around by car. In fact, to get from the airport to our dorm in Scape took about like an hour and a half, just weaving through all of the traffic and everything. The cities weren't made for cars, and car culture isn't a big thing. So everyone has the little Oyster cards and they ride the tube, and it's incredible. You can get across the city in 20 minutes just by riding the subways, and the maps are super easy to read. That was because at least Portland used to have a really established, free metropolitan transportation system, but not as much. And especially it's like places like Chicago, they do have subways and they have trains, but it's nowhere near the kind of metro system that London has with the tube. It was so nice. So use those Oyster cards.